Welcome back. Welcome in. It's Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. It's a Paramount podcast. I am Mike Casazza here on Monday morning. Chris, I laid good odds on the groundhog to not see its shadow yesterday on the VIP board. And like a lot of my bets, did not go well. 6 more weeks of winter. I really liked the matchup for the cloud cover yesterday. Unfortunately, it did not work out for Punxsutawney Phil. You know what did work out though, Chris? The long winter maybe not going to continue so bad, so miserably for basketball. Gets a win halfway through now, 500 overall in the conference, and just to be perfectly honest, the back half of the schedule is a lot easier than what they just went through, and than what the first half of the schedule was, or what they've done so far. They probably know who they are. They might have gotten through a slump at a bad timing when it comes to the opponents they play, but who knows? Maybe brighter days are ahead here. And then feels like maybe the biggest national signing day in several years. I mean, certainly since the advent of the immediate eligibility in the transfer portal and NIL a couple of years ago, but guys actually not only signing, but maybe like making up their minds day of, day before. I don't know. Feels like things are thawing and getting back to normal and getting exciting again now.
Yeah, time to get back to news. Sometimes the February period, at least the last couple of years, has kind of felt dead. And for reason because the recruiting period, they literally turned it into a dead period. They changed it, I believe it was 2 years ago, where the entire month of February is a complete dead period. There are no visits, coaches are not on the road, players cannot go to schools and visit them. And they did that for, coach and player mental health, trying to get them a break after a pretty wild off season. And so, yeah, usually it feels like, oh, you're in February, this is done. Um, Almost everybody has signed in December or already enrolled or the transfer portal. So the February signing day, I don't even, they even, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So much has happened in the past year. I can't even remember if there was anybody that signed last February for West Virginia. Maybe I think it was like a handful of walk-ons had ceremonies and that was about it. Walk-ons aren't even a thing anymore. So that won't be happening, but it does feel different this year. There will be more movement this year. There will be more things happening this year. And yeah, we can get to talking about that in a few minutes.
Let's start basketball.
Yeah.
Kind of a non-dramatic win yesterday, which maybe isn't like a surprise because West Virginia's just, I mean, they're better despite their flaws, better than Cincinnati. Cincinnati looks like a team that's going in the wrong direction in a hurry. It didn't really get hectic at all. I know that there were some spots there at the end, but I wonder if that just wasn't kind of like playing four corners a little bit and just trying to get out of town. You win by double digits, you're up by 22. They haven't had that type of cushion in a long, long time. Shot the ball well from the field, played good defense, got important performances from star players and the necessary support players. I'm not going to sit here and tell you all is well again and the rough spots are behind them because who knows what will happen as soon as Wednesday in Fort Worth. I do feel like that is much more what people have been expecting and maybe we're missing in the past couple of games. And Chris, I just really wonder if opposition has that much to do with it because the games that they just played, the stretch just went through, bookending the first Colorado game on the road with the second Houston game. That's quite a stretch of 18 days and some really good games and emotional performances and tough venues. And, you get out of that 2-4, not great, but also at a time where they really slumped. And if you're not at your best and you're playing some of your best opponents, that's going to be a bad combination. And man, just some of the numbers during that 3 game losing streak were freaky. I just didn't think that they were going to be that bad that long. And they just had to go up the road a little bit and play man, just a friendly team for a team that's in a slump and need some confidence, got some confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was exactly what they needed on Sunday. I was shocked that Cincinnati was 5.5 point favorites in this one. Like I
No
get
way.
that they were, home court and everything. West Virginia hadn't looked good for a couple of weeks, but 5.5 point favorites for a team that was 2-7 in the Big 12 conference, like just blew my mind there. But this was the kind of dominating start to finish win West Virginia needed. They even in a couple of their wins during this stretch, like it didn't feel good. Like it didn't feel like they were in control really. I mean, they had created some hectic chaos with what they were doing and were able to pull out wins and kind of pull away from a couple of teams. But this was, let me pull this. Yeah, 45 seconds. That's how long Cincinnati held the lead in this game, 45 seconds. And the last time they held the lead was 6-5, 3.5 minutes into the game. So from that point on, West Virginia held the lead. And when you can hold the lead for the last 33 minutes straight, 34 minutes straight, and for 36 of the 40 minutes, you've dominated that game. You are in control. And so seeing West Virginia be able to do that, I think that's going to help build them give them some confidence. Because again, is Cincinnati a good team? No. Are they an NCAA tournament team? Probably not. But that's what you're supposed to do when you go on the road and you face like a mediocre team, an NIT team. You should beat them if you think you're a good team, and that's what West Virginia did on Sunday. So that's good for. I think it more so. I mean, it helps because their resume doesn't take a hit. I think losing that game might have pushed West Virginia onto the wrong side of the bubble right now,
Mm.
but winning that game also just kind of gives them the confidence, like, hey, okay, we are a good team. Like we're not a bad team. We're a good team. Now let's go out and finish out the season.
Yeah, like if they had won by 6, if they had closed with like a, I don't know, a 10-2 run and won by 4, if they hit a buzzer beater, listen, a win's a win. I understand that. But if you watch that game, there's just definitely a quality difference between those two teams. Um, one's coached better than the other, to be quite honest, too. I mean, you could just tell West Virginia had plans and adjustments and knew how to handle whatever adjustments were being thrown at them. But to your point about like just game control, which again, this is not like a rally to win the game. It's not making some free throws at the end to get out of town by 3. They led for the final 32 minutes of the clock in double digits, Chris, for 27 minutes, 26 seconds. The final 27-26. 22-point lead gets cut to 11. They hadn't led anybody by more than 14 since the Colorado game. And then here's the fun part, Chris. 3-0 on Sundays, but also 12-1 when up at the half, 13-1 when you have a double-digit lead. That's just kind of their game. And the things they hadn't been good at lately were playing from behind. When you get down 10, you got a rally that takes attacks for sure. And then they had some bad starts. Their previous two under 12 media timeouts in the first half, they trailed 19-2 against Kansas State and 17-7 against Houston. So right away, 8 minutes in the game, you're down double digits. You're fighting just about the entire game. And then before that, even Arizona State, that was a 10-2 game, not the under 12 timeout, but still early on. And that game was closer because Arizona State isn't good enough to put away a team like West Virginia struggling on the road, but still managed to that day because West Virginia was that down. How down? These numbers, Chris, were crazy. Last in the country in first half points during the 3-game losing streak. Second to last in the country in 3-point percentage during the 3-game losing streak. And then the third lowest major conference field goal percentage. That's horrible. But that's a 3-game window. That's not a month. That's not in conference play. That's not the entire season. I just, those are, I mean, for me, are fun stats to present because stats, by and large, tell the truth. You could look at the games, those past 3 games, and say, yeah, that kind of aligns with what I saw. That's not what you saw in the, geez, what, 18, 17 games before that. It was going to come back to normal a little bit. And then it certainly did. I'm not sure that's a 50% from the field team, 50% from the 3-point range team, but it's not a team that's going to shoot 18% from 3. Not a team that's going to shoot like 36% from the floor. I think they can be closer to 50% because they've figured some things out about how to get to the basket, which I want to ask you this. How are they getting so many at the rim looks lately? Because that is not who they are. It's not what they've done, but I don't know if it's something they developed, if it's because the 3-point shooting was so bad, but this is 4 games in a row now where they've gotten not only a lot of points in the paint, but they're getting layups and dunks and not off offensive rebounds and run out baskets either. They're actually manufacturing close to the basket, half court buckets.
I think a lot of it, especially in the Cincinnati game, because Cincinnati, I'm glad you pointed out the coaching differential there because some of the stuff Cincinnati doing was just dumb. And maybe you don't blame that all on the coach. Some of it's the players, but you would think the coaches could because I think again, this is going to get to your point about the easy buckets and the points in the paint. Is a lot of these teams are throwing these double teams at Javon Small. They're throwing the double, they're trapping, trying to get out there and press on the ball. And once you start pressing out, pushing out further out, that's going to open up that paint. And when Javon Small, and I thought he did an especially good job of this against Cincinnati, keeps his head up, keeps his composure, and can beat that double team or at least step through it and get it in a pass. It may not be that pass that leads to a layup, but it's the pass to the next pass that then leads to a layup. And that happened a lot against Cincinnati. Again, I think in part because of whatever the Bearcats were trying to do, because when you the best time to double and trap is in corners coming off screens. And there were a few times on Sunday where Cincinnati just ran two guys at him from 20 feet away. Like guys were just running at him out of control 20 feet away. And when you give a guy that much time, like, oh, here comes a double team. Let me see. Where do I want to go with this pass? Like, when you have to give him the time to do that, that's easy pickings for a guy like Javon Small. You want to surprise them. You want to catch them off guard with some of these traps and these double teams. And Cincinnati was just running wild, like, oh, we got a double and sprinting from across the court. And easy pickings for Javon Small. How many assists did he have? 9? Did he get 10
Yeah.
at the last minute? 9. But
9.
he was in there. And again, like he had 9 assists, but it was also kind of a lot of hockey assists as well, where he would pass and then the next person would pass to the guy that got the layup. So smart plays from Javon Small, and kind of trying to take advantage of the weaknesses when these other teams double.
All right, here's something. For the past 4 games, these are baskets in the paint. Are you ready?
Yep.
13, 21, 14, 15. That's that's fairly good for West Virginia. They do not. I think they're like a bottom 15% in the country team when it comes to their just the attempt percentage in the paint. But that's a lot of baskets in the paint. But this is even better. 13 in the paint against Arizona State, 12 at the rim. 21 in the paint against Kansas State, 20 at the rim. 14 in the paint against Houston, 11 at the rim. 15 in the paint against Cincinnati, 11 at the rim. So paint shots should be easier to make. West Virginia bottom 10% in the country in paint shooting percentage. Don't know why, but it's not what they're good at. So fine. If you're in the paint and you're right under the basket, it's a heck of a lot easier. And they have somehow figured that out with cuts, with post ups, with just smart times to drive. Like there was one sequence yesterday where they ran the high ball screen, and then they with Hansberry, and then Small has Hansberry switch and go post onto the point guard, Day Thomas for Cincinnati. It happened once in the first half. It happened again in the second half. The very next possession, Small calls for it, and Cincinnati is scrambling to make sure that they don't get caught in it. And Small just puts his head down and drives for a layup. Just kind of a smart play. And again, that's an easy shot at the basket. So they're finding ways to do it. And again, when you're not making threes, that's tricky. Can I ask you one more just kind of analytical basketball question? What's your position on corner threes?
I always hated them personally, but I know they're the shortest 3-point shot, so you might as well get on it. If you can make them, you should take them.
They're oddly awful at it. Like I was looking at this 0 for 4 against Arizona, 1 for 1 against Colorado, 0 for 2 against Houston, 0 for 2 against Iowa State, 1 for 7 against Arizona State, 0 for 2 against Kansas State, 1 for 5 against Houston, and then yesterday 1 for 2. They just don't take shots there. They don't make them, which is weird because like Powell's a really good shooter, and he's been good from that corner. But like that number just shocks me. I think a lot of people would tell you that you'd much rather take corner threes, but you're right. Visually, it's a weird thing for some people. They just like to see the backboard and something square to shoot at. So I don't know. That's a question for DeVries when next time we get to talk to him here too.
I got
Upcoming
a question for
schedule.
you. Sorry,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. The numbers you threw out there about the baskets in the paint. That's made baskets, right? When you said
Yeah.
15 against Cincinnati. Okay, this is what I like. This is what I like. We've been harping on it for years, and not not. I'm certainly not taking credit for this because this has been like the basketball moves for a decade or more now. All the analytical nerds will point this out. Layups or threes and nothing in between. Stop with everything in between. It's wildly inefficient. And there was a time a few years ago where it drove me crazy with what West Virginia was doing on offense because it was a lot of mid-range jumpers and different things, very inefficient shots. You telling me against Cincinnati, West Virginia had 15 made baskets in the paint. I can see from the box score they had 9 made three-pointers. 15 plus 9 is 24. They made 25 shots. So 24 of their 25 made shots were in the paint or threes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
1 of 5 on mid-range twos.
There you go.
So yeah. And
Just get
then
rid of
for
that.
this
The,
for the
the,
season, they're shooting about 33% and getting about 10% of their shots, which is middle of the pack in the country. And I don't know that's what you want to be because again, they're not mid-range or at the paint kind of a team. But yeah, at the basket, 3 pointers and they're falling. That's great too. Let's go to the schedule now, Chris. Mentioned it's easier. I just like the way this breaks down. I don't know if they're going to go on a 4 game winning streak. I do think that it could be a heck of a lot worse than at TCU, home against Utah, home against BYU. I think that BYU game is going to be tough, tougher than
Mhm.
people think, just because the pace they play with. But it's at home. and a home and home where Utah is the two back-to-back home games, but Utah and BYU are on the road for both games before that too, so they're playing back-to-backs on the road. Could be worse. If this team is warming up a little bit, got to win. Now they get a chance to get some wind at their sails. It just seems like the schedule was rough, and now it comes back, and there's not a lot of soft spots in the Big 12, but this seems like an arrangement of games that is pretty favorable for them right now.
Yeah, 10 games remaining. If you can't go 5-5 with this, I think that'd be pretty disappointing at this point. And
Mhm.
we'll get to that in a second, what that means. But you're looking at left remaining on the schedule, UCF, Utah, TCU. I'm going down the list. Cincinnati, all teams that are below 500 in Big 12 play right now. All teams that are lower than West Virginia in the Big 12 standings. BYU and Texas Tech have been kind of good lately. Um, Against, are they top five, top 10 teams like Houston and Iowa State that West Virginia's been playing? No, but they're probably NCAA tournament teams, almost certainly NCAA tournament teams. So if you can get there's two games against BYU and one against Texas Tech. If you can get one or two, if you can get two wins out of those three, that can really help boost your profile as well. And so I think I'm with you. This is a schedule that is pretty favorable. I mean, it's a pretty even split, is it? Yeah, 5-5 home and away as well. So I think 5-5, that puts you at 10-10. You play 20? Yeah, it's 20 Big 12 conference games, huh?
Mhm.
Um, that's a winning formula, right?
I think
For
so.
tournament seeding,
Yeah,
NCAA tournament life, right?
yeah. Texas Tech might be a top 10 team, Chris.
I mean,
They're,
I cannot believe
they're
they beat. I mean, that was a ridiculous ejection of Toppin in that game. I didn't like it. And then they still beat them. I mean,
mhm.
that's up there. You lose your best player just a couple minutes into the game. That's similar to, West Virginia going to Kansas and beating Kansas without a couple of their best players. So
And no coach either. Like lose your coach and your best player back to back like that on the road where a team hasn't lost like 30, I think it was 33, 34 in a row.
yeah,
Pretty, that's one of the better wins in the country, I would think, this year. Finally, do you want to take a victory lap for Joseph Yusufu?
I've already done it on Twitter. I've already done it on the message board. So I'll keep it brief. I hope he continues to get minutes. I was disappointed when he only played a couple minutes in the first half. I was like, why are we jerking his minutes around again? Because I think, again, my point was when we had this conversation a week ago was 29 minutes, 11, 23, 16, 27, 9. Let him cook for a few games, see what you got. And I think in the second half they turned to him some more and he rewarded them. So let him get his 20 25 minutes, see what you got.
Yep. Also, it's really interesting that he's kind of got leaned on here offensively when they're starting Hansberry again. And I wrote about this, but I'll repeat it if that's okay. Your better lineups, obviously, with the situation they're in offensively. Hansberry's on the floor and Andre's not, I think. Overall, you can make the argument that Andre is better because of his defensive rebounding, but offensively, which is where they need the boost, Hansberry, when Hansberry and Small are going, that's a pretty good combination. We saw that yesterday. We've seen that many times. But Hansberry on the bench gives you some scoring in reserve, and they don't have a lot of bench scoring if it's Andre and Tenor and Yasufu getting scratch minutes here and there. But he's scoring off the bench. You're talking 25 points in the last two games, while Hansberry is starting. So whatever scoring Hansberry gives you off the bench, you put that in the starting lineup. You need something from the bench, and Yasufu has picked that up. I have not listened to it yet, but I understand that Darren DeVries made mention of some off the court situation that Yasufu was going through, and he's clear of that now. And perhaps that's why he's playing more and playing better. Again, you're kind of getting the idea here that apart from the health of their two important players, Tucker DeVries and Jaden Stone, they're kind of coming into light now out of the shadows, and it could be struggling performances or personally whatever, but it's it was a collective struggle, it seems like, too. And when a bunch of things go bad at once for a team that doesn't have a large margin of error, you're going to have ugly stretches like that. Not only three in a row, but 2-5 overall in the Big 12, where I think they'd like to have maybe one, maybe two of those games back and just have a better performance. And we'll see. Lost in this, Chris, was the game against Houston. You and I have not really spoken since then. Um, that's a double-digit game. I think 63-49 was the final score.
Yep.
Awful number for points on the board, but played pretty well in the second half. And I think notably walked out of the Coliseum thinking, feel a lot better about the way we're playing right now, even though they lost and got a lot of separation toward the end. And I don't know if they knew something we didn't know, if that was some sort of moral victory. I'm not sure, but it seemed like they were on to something Wednesday night.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of that second half, it was 39-19 at halftime. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, this could be sending them down a dark place. Like what's happening right now between the losses that have just happened and then this start, 19 points and a half, and you're down 20. The team is more than doubled you up. Houston's great, like an amazing team. I think they're a legitimate title contender. So there is no shame in losing to that team. But that first half performance was embarrassing. And it did make you feel like this is it. This is leading them down that path. And then to start out with an 11-0 run, start the second half. Again, like you said, and from your conversations with the players afterwards and seeing them cut that back down to how tight did it get? Five?
Five,
Like,
five
five
at the free
points?
throw line with a 1-on-1.
Yeah. And you get it down to five multiple times, down five, and just can't close it out. But still, you get it back to five after being down 20 against one of the best teams in the country. That does give you confidence because you know as well as I do, every time that a team in any sport is losing at a certain point, halftime or after 3 innings in baseball or whatever, the conversation, and they're losing very, very badly. The conversation shifts to, all right, let's win the second half. Let's win the next three quarters. Let's win the last 8 minutes or whatever that conversation is. And so I'm sure that Darren DeVries had some sort of conversation about that. Let's win the second half. West Virginia did. They beat Houston in the second half. Now, again, that's one of those moral victories, but sometimes you need those moral victories to kind of help right the ship. And I think West Virginia, that we may be looking back on that second half against Houston of a double-digit loss and being like, that might have been the most important 20 minutes of this season.
Um, I could tell a story I'm not going to. Yeah, if you make Houston call a timeout,
Oh
it's a very
boy.
veteran team that coaches itself on the floor. You make them call a timeout, that's good. They really made Houston work. They stole the ball from them. They made them really grind out possessions. Like Houston knew it was in a fight, and Kelvin Sampson said that. Like they did not fight in the second half. They got in the fight with about 7, 8 minutes left, and West Virginia wasn't in the fight in the first half, and then fought the entire second half. And those are good signs there. But if you just look at Houston's season here, leading the country in field goal percentage, defense, and scoring margin, West Virginia shot 57% in the second half, pretty good. Scored 30 points. Houston gives up like 52, and then outscored Houston by 6. Houston outscores teams by, I forget the number. I think it goes 18 or 19, but they won all three of the ways that Houston typically wins. It's one half. It didn't matter, but I think you can sit there and go, all right, it's not fixed, but hey, this is not as bad as it looks for 3 games or for the first half. And let's pick an easier fruit off the tree on Saturday at Fifth Third Arena. And sometimes it's just something like that there too. We'll shift gears, go another sport here.
Let's do it.
Who is Marshawn Oxley, Chris?
One of the most surprising commitments I can remember in WVU football in recent years.
Mhm.
A junior college edge rusher from Hutchinson who had, I believe, it was 12 sacks this past season. Received a visit from defensive line coach Willie Green. I don't know, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. Apparently returned the favor with a sneaky official visit just before the dead period started, and then doesn't have a phone. So getting in touch with him for interviews or doing things is not happening. And then he tweeted to WVU football. So it was a reply that doesn't show to everyone. So no one knew that he committed for hours till after he committed. I like it. You and I've had this conversation. You can never have too many quarterbacks. You can never have too many edge rushers. You can never have too many offensive linemen. Like out of all the positions, like those edge rusher is what at worst third, probably second on the hey, just get as many as you can and figure it out later positions. So adding him, especially after our conversations earlier this offseason, I don't hate it. I mean, it raises questions about, hey, was this an area of concern, or are you concerned about somebody else leaving from this position, somebody else not making it in, all that kind of stuff? Nothing, not to get everybody panicky. I know how we don't want to get a little chicken littles here, but just hey, the why, I think is the question. And if it is, hey, he's just that good, and you just take him and figure it out later, that's certainly an acceptable answer.
Yeah, I think if you can't have enough quarterbacks, you can't have enough guys to chase the quarterback or just make that important part of the offense complicated. And certainly, or a guy who's running around for safety, never mind open receivers, that's going to make the offensive duty. It's a little bit more difficult. So they're checking boxes there. That's a couple of guys in a row now, higher profile, lower profile in between that look like they can go toward that goal, which, as you mentioned, Havoc rate and West Virginia's, I don't know, apathy toward rushing the passer or pressing the passer. Like it just didn't seem like something they could design or commit to in the past. And Jimmy's and Joe's X's and O's, we'll see. But it looks like they got the personnel part where more toward where they want it to be. It's probably never where they want it to be or need it to be, but they are adding parts and kind of building that in their model there too. Wednesday eventful, you think? Surprises. We'll have some finality, I think, and not only in the form of signatures, which is kind of unusual, but also looks like guys who are going to be making up their mind. I know a couple have come off the board in state, I believe, but some other people that are certainly out there and are leaning toward West Virginia, but we don't know, which is kind of a throwback to days of old.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's 6 public commitments for West Virginia. Jamarius Bomar and Omani Weaver, the two defensive backs from down in South Carolina that were recruited by Rod West to Appalachian State originally. The moment that they got offered by West, that seemed to be, yep, lock them in probably in this class. Oxley, who we just mentioned, Keenan Eck, who we already knew about and had been discussing for a while. He committed weeks ago, but again, I think people confused him or lumped him in with the transfers because he was visiting at the same time as a lot of these transfers, but he is a junior college player, so he will be signing his paperwork on Wednesday. And then at least 2 in-state guys, Max Anderson from Spring Mills and Carter Zuliani from Bridgeport. Um, those are the type of players I'd keep an eye on Wednesday for a potential surprise. Not with those two guys. Those guys are solidly committed. I expect them to sign their paperwork and send it in. But there were a handful of other in-state guys that are, as we've explained, this 86 to 105 spot in the new scholarship limits that received these offers, and a couple of them jumped on him, like Zuliani and like Anderson. A couple of them elected to go, to other schools instead of taking one of these spots, and a couple of them have been kind of quiet about what their plans are. So I don't know if it's only going to be 6. Like it might end up being 7 or 8. Like again, I'm not expecting anything crazy, but again, I didn't expect Oxley on Sunday night in you know February 2nd. So could be all sorts of new things. This is part of what happens when you end up with 47 coaches, assistant coaches, and they all have 1,000 different relationships, and they're all coming from a bunch of different schools and territories and everything else. It's going to be kind of hectic when that first starts, and kind of exciting. Like it does kind of give you that feel of the olden days of recruiting where it wasn't all known beforehand. So good. We'll see what happens Wednesday.
Where where are we at now in relation to the 105 as we approach Wednesday? Because the
Right now,
105
one
is
of
the new 85 here, right?
yeah,
And not only, but how you get from 85 to 105 is probably going to require a little bit of an explanation too, because you're not throwing 20 extra full rides at people either.
yeah. So let's start there. I mentioned the 86 to 105 thing, and that's what they've talked about with some of these in-state guys like Zuliani, like Anderson, is hey, we want you on the team. You're gonna have one of those 105 spots, but you're going to be 86 to 105, which means essentially the revenue share that they are receiving as being a football player will cover their tuition. So they're not getting a scholarship, but they're receiving money to cover the schooling. So 6 of one, half a dozen of another kind of thing. They will be going to school to play football for free. Like that is, I think, the best way to put it and leave it
Yeah.
at that. They are going to be a part of the program. They will be part of the football team. They will be going to school and receiving a degree for free. So I think that's important to make sure that's clear. But that's how you get into the 105. Yeah, they're not just going to hand out 20 extra full scholarships and revenue sharing for 20 more players. The number I have right now of players on scholarship, whether it's that 86 to 105 or regular scholarship, whatever you want to say, we're lumping everybody in together here. 102. Like they're at 102. Like I never in a million years would have thought they would have been at this number if you asked me this, right as soon as Rich Rodriguez was hired. So that no way. Like they just can't add that many players that fast. And sure as heck, here we are, 102 out of 105. And I think it's going to be extremely interesting what happens over these next couple months because spring football is obviously happening. There are a lot of guys on campus right now, walk-ons under the old system because the The new system doesn't start until August. You don't have to be down to 105 until August. I believe it's either July or August, sometime in the summer, late summer, right before fall camp starts. So there are guys that are on campus right now who are walk-ons. Well, some of them left because they saw the writing on the wall of, hey, we're moving into a full scholar, no more walk-on system. They're cutting the number from 120 to 105. Got a new coaching staff coming in. So a lot of guys left in the offseason, finding new homes, getting on full scholarship somewhere else. Got it. Understand it. Pretty standard move, even without a coaching change and even without the cut in scholarship numbers. But there are still a couple dozen, I think, walk-ons that are on campus for this spring that are, I don't want to say basically auditioning for a couple of those scholarship spots, but really they might be. Like if they can prove to this coaching staff that, hey, we can be, a contributing force in this program, one of the 105 best players you can have on a roster, a couple of these guys might take a couple of the spots because ultimately we know a handful of more guys are going to leave after the spring because there still is the spring portal. So don't think of it as there's only 3 spots left. Think of it probably like there's more like 8 to 10 more spots left, maybe more. And maybe a handful of those go to the walk-ons on campus, and a handful more are kept to the side to pick out of the portal for anybody that leaves from other schools later.
Just thinking in my head here, you're looking at, I'm going to use round numbers here. Let's say 20 million is the revenue sharing number.
Mm-hmm.
You'll probably see West Virginia do like some other their peers have and go in that 70% range of that to football. So you're talking like 15 million for your football roster divided by 105 players is like $147,000 a player. I mean, you can buy a lot of notebooks and mechanical pencils with that if you're coming to school for sure. Never mind what else. Like, and is that going to be per person? Actually, I don't know. I don't know. I would assume not. You probably want to wait star power, I guess, but like those 86 to 105, especially if you're in state on a promise scholarship, you're going to be making money coming to play football at West Virginia, which that's a pretty powerful thing. And if you're a walk on, if you're a guy who was injured in Maryland and didn't have scholarship offers, if you're a junior college player who's bouncing back, you're in that 86 to 105 and you're making, I don't know, 50 grand, you're still probably clearing money to play football at West Virginia. So it's a whole new world, Chris. It's really very different here. One more thing that's kind of new here. Rich Rodriguez is gonna start spring football shortly here. It sounds like in a couple of weeks, and we'll have the whole thing wrapped up by the end of March. So we'll have spring football before we even have spring. And then this will be done way before the second portal window. Two ways to look at this. I think I know the way they're looking. It gives them more time to evaluate their roster and also to stay up to speed on what's happening at schools that might lose players at positions that interest West Virginia or players just period who interest West Virginia. It might also give players on the roster more time to evaluate their situation and look around and say, I'm better off at this place. So it could be good for West Virginia in the player acquisition sense. It could be bad in the player departure sense too. There's never going to be a perfectly suitable answer for both sides here, but I'm thinking that West Virginia is doing this so it can have more time to tell its players what they need to be told to answer the questions honestly about evaluations like, hey, you're better off somewhere else, or no, we really need you. And more importantly, give me some time to put together an NIL package for you before you hit the portal. I think that's a really important part of it, that if you are pressed up against that portal deadline because you do your spring game on April 29th, if a player says I'm leaving and you say, give me 2 days to get you some money from NIL, that does not exist. So as I'm talking, I'm answering the question here, is this a good idea or a bad idea? It seems like a pretty shrewd idea by Rodriguez and the staff to move the startup and more importantly, move the end far away from that portal window.
I mean, every no matter what decision you make, there's going to be some pros and cons. It's just like when you want to host official visitors. Like, is it better to host them early or late? And well, if you host them early, you might be able to commit right away. But if you host them early, then they take all their visits. Then the last thing on their mind is the last visit, which is bad for the early visits, and so on and so forth. So I think it's similar to this, and I like your idea of them being able to have that time, that space to make the pitch to try to convince them to stay. Because I do think some rash decisions are made
Yeah.
when the transfer portal is right after or around the same time that spring football ends. And yeah, I can't blame him either on this coaching staff. Like, can't even imagine being a coach and it's like, hey, here's your new team, your new place, and here's like 100 new players. I would want to get out to practice right away to figure out what I had. I would want to practice tomorrow. Um, the negative that I see, especially as somebody who focuses a lot on recruiting, just mentioned February is a dead period, like a big
Yeah.
thing in recruiting, especially for like the next class, this like 2026 class. Like, and you, Mike, like you go to these spring practices when they're made available, and you see recruits on the sideline at every single practice, every single one. And if you're having practice in February, now I don't know if it's going to start, how much of February it's going to take up, but any part of February, those kids can't be there. And so those are missed opportunities to, instead of having, say, 15 opportunities to host recruits up to see your program, now you're down to 10 or what, however the schedule works out. Again, we're recording this on February 3rd. Rich Rodriguez had made those comments on the radio the other day. And as far as I know, and I'm looking at my email right now, we have not received any sort of schedule
Yeah.
of what the actual plan is. So nothing official on that. But whatever it is, you're going to be limiting your opportunities to host recruits for 2026.
Interesting things happening on my phone, Chris.
Oh, well, is it related to the other email that I had this morning that I wanted to ask you about? Can
I
we go
didn't even
there?
get this email, so hit me.
Here we go. All right. So, general sports related, I guess everything. I received the email from the school that said the WVU Board of Governors has selected its finalists for the university president. Says they are, quote, on schedule, and they have found finalists that, quote, come from across the country and have extensive leadership experience. That they will be setting up in-person meetings with these people over the next few weeks before making a final decision. Given everything that's going on in college football, I mean, I'm focusing on college football, but all college sports, revenue sharing, realignment, possibly again, all of this stuff. Does this now become the most important decision for West Virginia University athletics, maybe ever up to this point?
Yeah, it's like oversight.
Have I gone too far with
No, I
that?
don't I don't know that you can. It's you're talking massive oversight right now. Because like I don't know. I don't know if or how or even what the right choice of words is, but can West Virginia do this financially without state assistance? And then can they get state assistance? I don't know that. That's something that's really interesting to me. Love to ask that question to people. And like I understand that's one of the reasons that they did bring back Rob Alsop was that he had very good relationships with the legislature. And if West Virginia does indeed pick Roger Hanshaw to be the next president, he's the former speaker for the state, right? So there's connections there too. So that's it, and it's just one example here. But if this does become sort of a reason to liaise between one and the other, then you're more likely to get money if you have good relationships, and if you have more money, you can do more. And that would also be good for Marshall too, I would think, because if you're giving schools money like public universities from the university fund, I guess I don't know, like then. And that's a sticky subject. I understand that. There's a whole lot to it that probably is best served at the end of a podcast here. But the president's ability to create and cross bridges now is really, really important. And then for him to put or her to put people in positions that they are fundraisers or that can boost revenue where it used to exist or it does not exist and should exist. Those are all massive undertakings just for the entire athletic department. But the big, big thing, Chris, is that whomever is in the big chair is going to have to find a way to boost enrollment. And a way to do that is through sports. And I've used this example a bunch and I'll do it again. But West Virginia has obviously stayed um, in touch, has watched what's happened with Jim Clements at Clemson. And that was a presidential situation that that school needed a bit of a boost, and their enrollment went through the roof at a time when they were winning football games and national championships. And then people here just kind of realize, wow, sports really is like an entryway for your students to your university. And if you have more students, you can do more across the university. And West Virginia's enrollment has just dipped. What they've offered has dipped. That's a double negative, and that's not a positive. So they're going to have to find a way to do that. And if they can lift up, again, it's tides and boats, Chris, and it goes both ways. Yes, sports can be very good for the student body and the bottom line in general, but also like whoever is the president is going to have to find ways to attract people to school And if you have more students, you have more student fees. If you have more student fees, you can give more support to other parts of the campus. It's all together. So I don't think, Chris, that you could overstate that enough. At this particular time, given who they succeed, like say what you will about Gordon Gee, but an influential person and a pretty prolific fundraiser when he was at his best. I don't think those days are that far in the past either. So it's not like he just lost his fastball and has been throwing knuckleballs for years. They're going to have somebody who can continue to do that, but also has a plan to have a team to that, and also someone who can find ways that are new or unusual or like maybe tabooed as to how to make money and get this back where it's going. And again, I think that some presidents are going to come in and have a reservation to do a whole lot for sports when the university is in the situation this one is in. But if you have a good relationship with your athletic department, your athletic director, or people in there, um, it becomes a little bit easier to explain away or to justify too. So it's a monumental pick. I don't think you can overestimate or over dramatize that at all. Now, who's it going to be? Don't know, because for some stupid reason they decide to keep that quiet and not tell people, which is ridiculous. Like, don't get me going on that, but like that's absolutely the public's business is who is being interviewed and considered for the presidential job at the university.
It's a good time to ask if you got a FOIA update
Nope,
yet,
it's
or
not. It's not a good time. It's never a good time to ask me that, Chris. I'm going
that's
to keep my mouth shut on that
all
stuff.
right.
Win
I
my
mean,
battles in public. And let me just say hi to the people who were listening in the legal office too, because um pretty popular over there. Not for the reasons you
yeah,
think, but still.
that's all right, Mike. I mean, it's hard work scanning one sheet of paper and emailing it
It's
to.
it's not the click, it's the drag that I
Yeah,
think it just hangs you up that much. It's right there, Chris. The file is right there in the desktop, and just clicking it's the easy part. Dragging it's the hard part. And it takes 2.5 months. I
I was
understand
gonna
that. I'm
say,
not
what are we
upset.
at, 2 months now? Two and a half?
I'm not, I understand the drag is very difficult. You might have to get like a temp in there to help you. Um, I don't know, maybe like a 3 hour course in drag.
Yeah. I'm
It's
glad we
hard.
could
I'm
get
not,
you. I'm glad we could get you riled up right as we
no,
were
I
ending the
understand
podcast.
completely. I understand completely. Like if you're a Dell person, what are you gonna do with this Mac?
Yep.
I don't know. You might need 6 weeks to get that explained to you. Don't know. Sad. I'm very sympathetic for the cause.
I think we should cut this out and make this a clip, make it its own separate video.
My heart goes out. I just boy, just can you imagine having to answer emails like that and just like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I got to open this folder and drag this one over there into the email, and then I got to press send. It's not in the job description. It's not fair.
Ah, man. You got anything else, or
I'm
you
off
want to
the
wrap
career.
it up? All right. Well,
Let's wrap it up.
let's
Oh,
wrap it
hey
up.
man,
Yeah.
Steve Sabins. Hey, Steve Sabins today, because
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah,
that
that's right.
ping here in the background, that's the start of baseball season. So a lot of talk from him. We'll have some of that stuff on the site soon. Basketball game Wednesday. No interviews before, so good time for Steve Sabins to pop his head out and do some season preview stuff. Obviously, Wednesday big for football, presidential search, and Chris got to beat in the football schedule right
Yeah.
under the deadline because it's coming out at 11 Eastern time tomorrow. But I think we have some intel here we can share soon.
Well, feel free to share it, and then you and I will be back here on the podcast talking about it after it's officially released, if you will.
Until then, I'm Mike Casazza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.